You know, as I travel across Canada, I hear so many people define the missional church in so many different ways. Missional church is not a model. It's not a new strategy. It's not a new program that we add to the stuff that we're already doing that says, you know, if we just do this thing, then we'll find the magic bullet so that more and more people will come into our church. No, we need to properly define missional church if we're going to make any progress in what it means to be the missional people of God. And I think one of the best definitions I've heard is around the whole issue of it being a renewed theological vision of the church in mission, with the church serving as a sign, a servant, and a foretaste of the kingdom of God. It's Charles Ringma in his book, Catch the Wind. So properly defined, not a model, not a new strategy, but a renewed theological vision of the church in mission. And what that does is it leads us to a description of how do we take this from just being conversation to actually landing. We have to understand that the missional church, if it's a renewed theological vision, ends up, we have to start with God. We can't start with our ecclesiology, we must start with our theology. If we start with our ecclesiology, the question is what works? If we start with our theology, it's what's right, who is God, and how's he working in our culture? Another way of describing the missional church comes in developing a framework for how do we live out our life together as followers of Christ. Dallas Willard talks about the fact that if we're spiritual beings, our life in the kingdom exists around the old Shema from the Old Testament, or even when he interacted with the Pharisee and said, you need to learn to love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, strength, love your neighbor as yourself. And those 5 components, Willard said, were really what spiritual life was all about. And I think the same is true for the missional church. It provides us a framework where we love God with all of our hearts, is mission. We learn to love God with all of our minds. That's mission. And strength and neighbor and one another. All 5 of those aspects go into what it means to have this renewed theological vision of the church. It takes a lot more unpacking, but there's a snapshot of what we were talking about.